Hi everybody, great job with week 2 when we reviewed some of the basics of probability theory and random variables. I really enjoyed reading your learning journal entries this week. I was especially happy to see a couple of people mention how they've already found applications for some of the material we've covered with respect to what they do at work. I was also very pleased to read a number of entries that described spending an adequate amount of time on the central limit theorem and really convincing yourself that you had an understanding of the theorem. That's great. The central limit theorem is really important and is something that we use over and over again in a class like this and really throughout statistical analysis. Please remember to write an entry in your journal at least once per week, but you're encouraged to write multiple entries per week, but a minimum of one due by Sunday at midnight. The discussion forum, once again, the original posts and comments were great. I really enjoyed reading about your proposed empirical research papers. There were a lot of really interesting topics that you all mentioned. Just to mention a couple of them, the social media's impact on interpersonal relationships, the impact of virtual learning is a very timely topic. The success of arranged marriages versus non-arranged marriages were just a few examples of the very interesting topics that you all proposed. Just some general points to make about the discussion forum. I think one thing that was quite clear in reading through the forum is that we almost always need a peer to review our work. It's almost always the case that it's not until someone else's eyes see our work and reviews it that we realize that we've missed something important. And sometimes it's very obvious. I think we saw this come up with a number of the comments in the discussion forum, and I think it was just a nice example of the importance of the peer review process. I think another general theme that came up in the discussion forum was we recognized how it's often far easier to identify a variable of interest than it is to acquire data on said variable. It's not uncommon for the ideal data to not be available, and we often just have to do the best we can with proxies. One other thing that I just wanted to mention about the proposed topics in the discussion forum, the level of observation, the entity or elements, if you will, matters a lot and will influence what our data looks like. And we also need to be aware of what's known as the ecological fallacy. What this means is the phenomenon that we're interested in studying occurs at some level. Maybe it's the individual level, maybe it's the state level or country level. We ideally want data at that same level of observation. For example, if I'm interested in how an individual's income influences the probability that they vote for a particular political candidate, that phenomenon occurs at the individual level. I would ideally want data at the individual level, observations on people, their income, their voting choices. I could, of course, acquire data at the state or country level and conduct a similar analysis, but we just need to be really careful about ever trying to export findings at one level of aggregation to a different level of aggregation. This is known as the ecological fallacy and just something that we should always be aware of when conducting empirical research. This week, we are moving on to statistical inference. This is when we will use our sample of data to draw conclusions about characteristics in the underlying population of interest from which we drew the sample. Just one quick thing to point out is that the midterm exam is due at the end of Module 2. This isn't until the end of next week, so we have some time, but important to keep it on your radar. That's all for now. Please feel encouraged to reach out if you have any questions at all, and take care.